Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast, coming to you on a Saturday evening. I'm here in Happy Valley at our Lions 24/7 headquarters, and we've got Daniel Gallen out in Los Angeles, still at the LA Coliseum, where Penn State prevailed 33-30. It certainly wasn't the game flow that we predicted for you on our pregame podcast, but Penn State rallies from a 14-point halftime deficit. That's the largest halftime deficit that this team has faced since 2020. And rallies from a 7-point deficit with minutes remaining in the matchup out in Los Angeles. Daniel Gallen's going to give us a lot of feedback from post-game interactions with James Franklin, with multiple players. But, man, Ryan Barker proves to be the hero. He made 4 field goals on the day, none bigger, of course, than the game winner in the first overtime session after USC's kicker failed to convert his opportunity, which was a bit longer than Barker's. But, Daniel, you caught up with the hero of this game, Ryan Barker, a guy who stepped up to the starting place kicker job just last week. He's 5 for 5 on field goals since then. Actually, 6 for 6 on field goals since then. And he comes home riding a lot of momentum as the guy who pushed Penn State ahead, got them to 6-0, and sent USC to 3-3.
Ryan Barker got the question post-game that, 2 years ago, if someone told you you would be doing this, on the field at the LA Coliseum, getting interviewed on national television, everything that came with today, the game winner. And he said, "You're absolutely crazy." That would be what he would tell someone if they said this to him 2 years ago. This is my first time talking to him. I know that you spent some time talking to him earlier this year. He's someone that comes across as a very confident, a little bit of swagger there, but just very confident, believes in his abilities, knows what he's here to do, and wants to go out and do it. He said that when they iced him, he had just lined up. He called it his aiming point, and right then he knew he was going to make it. That he didn't have any second guessing himself, during that timeout, anything like that. I know that he said on the TV broadcast that he was thinking about how he was going to celebrate his kick. Someone asked him if he planned how he was going to celebrate post game. He said that I didn't have that planned. It was just instinctual. But I mean, just a thrilling ending for Penn State. Just a really, I guess, crazy game, crazy way to end a long afternoon here in Los Angeles. And it's a long season. You're going to have different heroes every week. A lot of times so far this season, it's been the usual suspects. For a while today, it looked like it might be some usual suspects, but in the end, it ends up being the walk-on kicker who didn't even travel to the season opener.
Yeah, he came to town last summer, was number 3 on the depth chart last year, and right now he is clearly the guy for Penn State at the kicker position. And that move that he made after he put the game away was the go to bed for USC, put them to sleep, and they suffered a painful loss for Lincoln Riley. But this was this is, you want to talk about clearing a hurdle. What Penn State did today, down 20-6 at the half. Again, hadn't faced a deficit like that at halftime since a 2020 matchup at home against Iowa. That was their 5th consecutive loss to open that season in 2020. This time around, you're the number 4 team in the country. I think we all viewed USC as kind of a ranked opponent. I know they were 26th nationally. They certainly played like a ranked opponent today. But, Daniel, there were a lot of things that went wrong for Penn State today, giving up chunk plays, the balance that USC was able to establish on offense, what that did in terms of kind of taking Penn State's pass rush away from a dominant stretch during the course of this game. You didn't get the ground game going all that much with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. You had Drew Aller throw 3 interceptions. One of them was on a Hail Mary throw, but he's a guy who had 3 interceptions on about 550 career passes coming into the matchup. And yet, we're talking about Penn State, as James Franklin put it, going into a bye week feeling awesome because they're 6-0. They get a chance to kind of salivate with that for a moment and kind of see what could come next and be excited about it. And more importantly, they get a chance to really rest up a little bit, get themselves right before they come back to action. But what do you make of Penn State kind of staring at a loss in the face a couple different times, not blinking, and how much does that have to do with their quarterback, what we saw from number 15 today?
It's really interesting to think about this in the grand scheme of the past couple of years, at least since I've been on the beat post-COVID. I know we talked about it after the Bowling Green game, how that was only the 5th game they'd had since 2021 that they'd won by single digits. This is the type of game that over the past couple of years that it really felt like they'd been on the wrong side of at various points. And then you talk about Drew Aller. He's someone where last year in their two biggest games of the year, including one that was on the road in a pretty hostile environment at Ohio State, where he just didn't play well, just was not there for his team. And it made you wonder a little bit today, was Drew Aller going to show up? Was he going to be the one to lift the team? Because that was something with Aller, to go back to when he was recruited, when he came in. You talk about the definition of a 5-star quarterback. And we're at a place at USC that's had its fair share of 5 stars come through, and you've seen what they've done to this program and the types of performances they've had. But the thing was, when you were talking about, okay, you had Sean Clifford for 4 years, now you have Drew Aller coming in, and the hope that you have with Drew Aller is that he will be the one to elevate you, through those games that are close, that he can be the difference in a game. And I think that I expected to see that last year, and we really didn't. But I think that today was a step in starting to see that. When they lined up for that drive, I think it was like 5:56 left. They have to go 75 yards. I wasn't the most confident that Penn State was going to get the job done. It was sort of shaping it. You were kind of structuring the story in your head that, like the turnovers were just a little bit too much, that they just had, the defense just couldn't get the one stop they needed. And it really didn't turn out that way. Drew Aller drives them down the field. A couple clutch 4th down plays from Julian Fleming, a really nice play design where everyone seemed to forget about Nick Singleton for the touchdown. And you had Drew Aller provide that, I guess, signature drive since he's been at Penn State. It obviously was not the cleanest game by him, but I think that in totality, the end result is what you want from your 5-star quarterback, from the guy that you think can take you into the college football playoff. I think that the interceptions, you don't like them, but when you have this kind of new Aller that we talk about, where he's confident, he's willing to take the shots, I think you have to live with that a little bit. Mark Brennan had a good shot of, I think might have been the second pick that was in Liam Clifford's direction. There's 5 red jerseys, or no, it was the first one. There's 5 red jerseys there. And then the second one that was, trying to fit it into Khalil Dinkins and it got tipped. I think there was like 5 red jerseys in the picture on that one too. But I think that we just saw Aller play so timid last year, especially in these spots. And we just didn't see that today. We saw someone who, I think the second 4th down conversion to Julian Fleming, where he avoided the free rusher and was able to make the throw on the run. I don't know if we really see Aller make that play last year. So I've been rambling a little bit, but I think we saw that next step from Drew Aller today, something that we had not really seen before. And I think that's very welcome if you're Penn State and if you're a Penn State fan.
Yeah, everything you said rings true. And I just felt like there was a walking on eggshells to Drew Aller's sophomore season as starter. I think part of that was the way Mike Yurcich coached these guys. Part of it was just Drew Aller being a first-year starting quarterback at this level. Today, he goes for 391 passing yards. That's well beyond his previous career high, which was 325.
I didn't know he got to that number.
Yeah, he was almost at 400 passing yards. He was at 325 in his first career start against West Virginia last year. That held up as his high until today. He was 30 of 43, directly on that 70% completion rate, which he has lived in as a junior. And additionally, just the willingness to step up and fire the ball in contested moments. It wasn't like he was finding guys wide open. Nick Singleton, that touchdown made it look pretty easy. He was able to jog into the end zone there. But for Drew Aller, the zipping the passes to Julian Fleming twice on 4th down. You heard from Julian Fleming right after this game, a guy that had some early moments that were regrettable. Interference call on him that cost Tyler Warren an early touchdown on the first drive, and then a drop from Julian Fleming. But boy, did he come up big. 4th and 7, 4th and 9, I think they were. Drew Aller looks his way. Final possession of this game for Penn State. They did get a late possession with 5 seconds left, but this was the game-tying drive. And if Fleming doesn't make both those plays, they're jogging off the field, and instead of getting on the plane like Soul Plane, which is the way James Franklin described the atmosphere that they expected on the trip home, it would have been a very quiet, disheartened group getting on that plane if Julian Fleming doesn't make those catches and if Drew Aller doesn't zip those balls in.
Julian Fleming credited the 6-second mentality as something that helped him get get through that. I think that post game, he acknowledged that those are catches that he has to make. But at the same time, he's a veteran. He's a guy that I think you can trust to keep putting back out there. That he made those 2 mistakes early. He's been through a lot in his career. He's seen the highs and the lows. He's someone that can be ready to be there when you need him. And I think that even though he had those drops, Drew Aller still looked to him in 2 of the biggest moments of the game. And I think that just speaks to who Fleming is and how he's developed a rapport with him. They just turned the lights out on me in this radio booth. Or maybe I'm not moving enough to turn them back on. But I think that it just showed, the connection that they have. And I asked Julian Fleming after the game, and I think I posed it probably pretty bluntly, not with the most tact, but it was basically, in this type of situation, Aller came up short last year. That this was an area where he really struggled. He didn't show too much, but he was able to today. And the way that Fleming described him and Fleming acknowledged that this is a kind of a stupid phrase or a dumb phrase, but he said, cool as a cucumber. That Aller in the huddle knew exactly what they needed to do. They had the utmost confidence in him. They'd been repping these 2-minute drills, and that's really what showed down the stretch there.
When you look at this performance, I mean, we got 10 minutes into the podcast without mentioning Tyler Warren, and we had to address how things ended and just kind of the late scramble of this game. And I think that involved getting Drew Aller into the conversation. But Tyler Warren, I mean, James Franklin said it during his post-game press conference. He said, I've been banging the horn for this guy as the best college football, or as the best tight end in college football. He says, let me rephrase that. He's one of the best players in college football. And I know you were live and in person in the press box, and I'm here in Happy Valley headquarters watching on television. It was the Tyler Warren show during that broadcast on CBS, the way they were talking about his impact, the way Nittany is using him, the way he snapped the ball and caught a touchdown on the same freaking play. He threw a pass in this game as well. He was lined up all over the field. But you look at the receiving numbers, 17 catches. Nobody has ever caught more passes against the USC Trojans. They played a lot of football out there in Los Angeles. 224 receiving yards. Only Jahan Dotson's 242-yard performance against Maryland back in 2021 tops that all-time among the Nittany Lions. And, of course, he caught a touchdown. It could have been 2 if not for that Fleming OPI early in the game. Daniel, we're running out of adjectives for Tyler Warren, a guy who really doesn't like to talk about himself, which makes him very unique. We thought he was going to blossom as at least an all Big Ten caliber tight end. I think by the first few games we were talking about All-American, but he really is going to resonate nationally when people get a chance to watch the highlights from this one, the beautiful catch he made, the ambitious way that Andy Nittany is using him as a weapon. He is mainstream, baby. He is going to be out there, and he's earned it.
Yeah, I think now the Heisman campaign officially starts for Tyler Warren. During the game, our Bud Elliott at 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports, who's been on this podcast before, he tweeted, Tyler Warren is the most outstanding tight end in the country. There's no doubt. And I think that Bud is someone who does not give praise out, I think, lightly. And he's someone whose evaluations that we trust. And I retweeted him and I said, pick your adjective. Outstanding, complete, best, valuable, like it all fits. And that's who Tyler Warren is. And I think I have to take a little bit of a mea culpa right now, or I have 2 to take. The first was that I tweeted that Julian Fleming was not having a good day, which was true in the first half. Not true by the end of the game. I own that one. Sorry, Julian. And then for Warren at halftime, you're looking at a team that's down 20-6. I did feel like it got a little too cute down there a little bit at the end zone. I think there were 3 plays in a row, including the OPI where Drew Aller looked to Tyler Warren. And I think at least one of those plays involved throwing short of the end zone. There was a 3rd and goal play in the second half after this down at the one end zone where they're on the 5 and they threw it short again to Warren. It did feel like the target share, Warren got targeted 10 times in the first half and Aller threw 18 passes. And so at halftime I tweeted, like, I don't know how feasible it is to run your whole offense through the tight end. like Tyler Warren, because we've talked about the type of player that he is, but I think in certain respects it is a little bit limiting. And I just didn't, especially down by 2 touchdowns, I did not see a path back running it through Tyler Warren. And immediately on it, he snaps the ball and catches the touchdown. And so I'm wrong right away. But just the way that the game was going and the struggles that Penn State was having, finishing drives, it for a little bit, it felt like this might turn into a track meet. And we weren't exactly sure if they could keep up because we have not seen them in a track meet yet this year. And I didn't know if Warren was the guy to pull you out, to in a track meet. And I think things worked out for them. And I think that Warren, took another jump today with the type of game that he had. I'm going to have to go back and figure out how Andy Kotelnicki was scheming up some of the things where he was wide open on a couple of these plays, even after he has 10, 11, 12 catches. It was really, really impressive. But it was just a very, very impressive individual performance today. I did not think that would kind of work against an opponent like a USC in this type of spot, especially down by 2 scores, but it did. And I think that's a testament to Warren as a player. That's a testament to Andy Kotelnicki and his offensive scheme. And I think it's a testament to Drew Aller for having that trust in him, giving him the ball where he needs it. So, I mean, it was like through 2 drives and Warren had already had a catch, a carry, and a completion. And so, I think a lot of people learned who he was on national television today. And it'll be interesting to see how this national conversation about this tight end at Penn State, who's doing everything literally, looks in these next couple of days.
I had an opportunity to cover Saquon Barkley's last season with Penn State, my first season on the beat. Obviously, I got a chance to see Jahan Dotson emerge as an All-American back in 2021. We talked about the 242-yard game he had against Maryland, but that game against Maryland came as Penn State was kind of trying to fight off a second-half spiral of the season. This performance for Warren comes when the Penn State offense is searching for answers, facing a deficit as the number 4 team in the country out in the LA Coliseum. Just feels a little bit different in terms of what Tyler Warren meant to the team today. 20 targets on the day, 17 catches on 20 targets. And before I get into some of these chunk plays that he had, I want to remind everyone, Tyler Warren is 6'6", 260 pounds. Here were some of his gains through the air today. 14, 21, 10, 20, 18, 10, 32, 34, 17, 21. I mean, it's remarkable what he is accomplishing at this size. And clearly, as a guy who was coming in with a bullseye on his back and knowing that what he meant to Penn State, we think he did pretty good through those first 5 games. Daniel, he had 23 catches for 289 yards in those first 5 games. And today he has 17 catches for 220 yards. So it just about doubled his stats almost in one ball game. When it comes to this team, it was today the reason it felt like it wasn't going to end up being a win for Penn State was because early on the defense had some moments and then the offense couldn't really hold up its end of the bargain. And then later in the game, as Penn State's offense finds its groove, USC's picking up chunk plays. You've got their running backs coming up with big plays in a way that we didn't really expect and a bounce that we didn't anticipate. And they protected Miller Moss, doing some different things against zone defenses, doing some different schematic efforts to try to get the ball out of his hands fast. And so I'll tell you what, Daniel, for them to get out of this one, the way the defense played particularly, I don't think any of us thought it was going to be that much of a struggle, but there were 2 moments coming off those interceptions where Drew Aller throws a pick in your own territory, and each time on 6 offensive plays total for USC, 0 collective yards, had to settle for 2 field goals, which they made. Those mattered, but Penn State's defense in adverse situations trying onto the field after those turnovers, for as much as there is to point to today and say Tom Allen has some work to do, those were decisive moments when you look back and see how the game played out.
Definitely. The defense came through in the big spots where it needed to. One of our subscribers, kind of tongue-in-cheek, in our post-game updates thread, asked me, if I would say this game was won on the margins. I know that that's something that I've really been harping on for this team if they want to get to where they want to go. But I mean, that's like what I'm talking about, where to limit points off of turnovers, to get put in that situation with your back up against the wall, and come through. I thought that was really impressive, especially looking at a team with the offensive talent that USC has. You did kind of wonder a little bit, like, how many stops did this Penn State defense have in it? Because USC struck big a couple times. Woody Marks was breaking off some big gains. Quentin Joyner had that long touchdown run on a really, really nicely designed play. And every time Penn State got a stop, it was a really, really big win for the Nittany Lions, especially when the offense was scuffling a little bit. And, that's why I was a little worried when it came down to that last drive, where I was like, I don't know if Penn State really, if this offense has it. I don't, like, maybe they asked this defense to get one too many stops when USC went down to get that go-ahead touchdown, but that obviously wasn't the case. And then you look at what they did in that overtime period, where they were able to prevent USC from really gaining any yardage or
lost yards.
Yeah, they had to settle for that long field goal. And you contrast that with what Penn State did on its drive, where it still went 4 and out, but they got a little bit closer. They got the ball centered. They got the conditions perfectly right for their kicker to deliver on it. So I think that this defense, it's different than it was last year. I think that was the big thing that I said a lot coming into this year. Tom Allen is not Manny Diaz. They're going to do things differently. They saw a lot of talent move on from last year. Like, it's going to be different. That's just what it is. That's college football. And so I think we're still maybe waiting to see that complete performance shine through against a big time team, but we've seen them settle in nicely, make big plays in some big spots when they've needed to. And at the end of the day, like, they're 6-0.
Yeah, coming into this matchup, the last 16 Big Ten games for Penn State, 15 of them, they held the opposing squad under 100 rushing yards. USC, through the first 3 possessions this afternoon, they were at 140 rushing yards. So you knew, okay, well, it's not going to go according to script here. The blueprint's kind of thrown out a little bit. And Woody Marks continued to really be a problem for them over the course of this game in particular. Obviously, there was a really 75-yard run on the first play of the second quarter from Quentin, or of the second possession from Quentin Joyner. That was a bit of a backbreaker. But I felt like Miller Moss was, as advertised, a guy who's looks the part, replacing Caleb Williams. But the cornerbacks made some really timely plays down the field. I thought the perimeter play against blue chip talent at wide receiver for USC, whether it was Elliott Washington, AJ Harris, but it's kind of been a few guys that you can hang your hat on stepping up to make plays, it feels like, this year, with KJ Winston on the sideline for the last several weeks. It's Jalen Reed. It seems like every week he's making a play. Abdul Carter, and it could have been bigger for him because he was very close to pulling down an interception that could have swung the game earlier. And then denied Dennis Sutton. He shows up with another flash in the backfield. I know you spoke with Reed afterwards. He had an interception that put USC out of reach of getting maybe a game-winning long field goal at the end of regulation. He actually gave Drew Aller a shot to throw a Hail Mary at the end of regulation. But he was very emotional on the field after this game. He was kind of embracing James Franklin, leaning on him a bit. And Franklin said in postgame, this guy's Detroit tough. When we get interaction with Jalen Reed, he comes across, as a hard guy. And he's been one of the beloved figures of this locker room for a while, and that's part of it. But he broke down a little bit after this game. And I think you can pick up from a lot of guys how much passion and emotion was put into it. What do you make of the defensive effort, Jalen Reed stepping up, and really what Tom Allen's bunch can take out of, had some nightmarish moments, but what they can take out of the whole big picture of a 33-30 victory?
I think to start with Reed and his emotion, he said that it was something where just to win this type of game, to have all these swings, to be back and forth, I think he knows how big that interception was at the end of the game to keep USC out of field goal range and to send it to overtime. And he said that he was just so happy and that he was overwhelmed, by that moment, and to win a game like this. I think some of it goes back to what I talked about earlier, is that Jalen Reed has been here since 2021. He's a senior. I mentioned that window where this is the 6th single-digit win that they've had in that time span. They've been on the wrong end of some single-digit losses, a lot of those to Michigan and Ohio State, with a couple more during that 7-6 season when Reed was a freshman. And so to have Penn State finally come out on the right side of one of these games, I think meant a lot. You saw how they were celebrating on the field after the game, like the level of excitement that there was. I just think that this win is a really, really big deal for this program as they move forward. And I think that kind of came out through Reed and his emotion right there. As for the defense, there's definitely a lot for them to clean up, I think, and to look into during this bye week. I think we're going to hear a lot about
this, Daniel. They've got one team on the schedule, at least the regular season schedule, that brings talent on the roster on the offensive end like USC. It's Ohio State. Spoiler alert. But James Franklin went out of his way in postgame to talk about the play color that they possess. Lincoln Riley may not be stacking up wins, but few are viewed like him as an offensive mind. And the talent. He actually said they've got a lot of NIL. And you look at there's a lot of transfers on that roster. So he wanted to make it known that this defense was working against a big-time play caller and a big-time offensive roster.
Yeah, and I think too, it's the cliche to lean back on where it's, oh, these guys are on scholarship too, or as Franklin sort of put it, these guys are getting NIL too. Yeah, and I think that's what you're in for when you play USC, especially with someone like Lincoln Riley, who's going to have these guys in position to succeed. I mean, I mentioned that Quentin Joyner, touchdown run. That was a really nicely designed play, and you had Zachariah Branch involved, who's a gravitational player. That guys
had tremendous play calling over. They had answers in a lot of different spots, and where it felt like it was landing blows on Penn State. And I was really impressed by their offensive bounce back, considering what they looked like last Saturday night against Minnesota.
And Franklin outlined it as a little bit of the chess match that was going on, where it was a lot of the check with me, line up, see what the defense is in, do motion to figure out what they're in. And Franklin acknowledged that they made some really good play calls off of that too. And so I think that coming in, it's really hard for me to see you shutting down a USC offense with the talent. They're not invincible, obviously, as we just saw, but it's just such a solid group of offensive talent with someone like Lincoln Riley who has the keys. There's a lot of other stuff I think that can contribute to where they are right now. But I think it was a really good challenge for the Penn State defense. And I think when you're in those situations, it's going to be, you need to get the right stops at the right time. And today that was in the form of those, 6 points, 2 field goals off the turnovers, and then Jalen Reed's interception. I think that Penn State stood tall in those 3 spots, and that ended up helping them win the game. I think that you mentioned the one team left on the schedule that is on this level and beyond this level in Ohio State, who last I saw was in a track meet up in Eugene against Oregon. Like, you're not expecting the Penn State defense to shut them down for an entire game. You want them to get like 3 or 4 key stops, to get the right stop in the right moment. That's what you're asking your defense to do in that kind of game, and that's what Penn State did today. So I think that maybe in terms of the granular stuff, nuts and bolts, different calls, formations, there's probably stuff that they want back and probably stuff that they're going to have to address. But I think overall, when you look at what you need out of a defense in a game like this, they got that, and they're 6-0.
Penn State was moments away a few different times from people across the media world being able to pull the trigger on familiar stories about James Franklin, and what this era of Penn State has been, and not quite being able to get over the hurdle in a moment like this when you're favored, you're a top 5 program, but they did get through it. And first off, it just feels a little bit different now. This team now officially feels a little bit different because of what they were able to get through today, how they were able to win. I know they didn't cover the spread. I had them winning by 11. That doesn't matter. The way it went today and the way they responded to it, this team feels different now. I think we can officially give them that stamp. And there's only 3 squads coming into the day who are ranked ahead of them in the AP poll. You talked about 2 of them, Oregon and Ohio State. They're playing each other. As we record right now, it's a 1-point game with Oregon leading early in the 3rd quarter. But Texas flattened Oklahoma earlier today. They're the number 1 team in the country. But that's it. You look across, there's 130 plus teams in college football. Those are the only ones ahead of Penn State right now. And they get to spend next Saturday enjoying some football or enjoying relaxing away from the sport. And they'll resurface at Wisconsin in a couple weeks. Daniel, with that in mind, we're at midseason. They're 6-0. Good chance they're going to be number 3 in the country come Sunday afternoon. And they're going to stay up there because they've got a little time away. how much is the wind at their sails after a game like this? And how much are you maybe willing to buy into this being a team that not only could host a game for the college football playoff as it tries to make its debut in the tournament, but maybe even take a third bye this season by claiming one of those top spots when it's all said and done after Thanksgiving?
I mean, I think that Ohio State looms large. And then on top of that, depending on how that game ends, the idea of seeing an Oregon or an Ohio State again in a Big Ten title game, I'm not there yet. Like that's still it's still a little ways to go. But I think overall, in terms of the confidence in this team, you have to feel better about it. I know that when we do our preseason predictions, we don't necessarily do them game by game. When we post them to the website and when we talk through them, maybe we'll talk about the games that we have them losing. But pretty sure we all went 10-2.
We did.
And one of the two, I think for most of us, was Ohio State. And I think for the second two, the second one, even though we didn't necessarily assign it, I think the subtext of it was USC. And I think that with USC dropping 2 out of 3, that changed a little bit. Obviously, we all picked Penn State to win today and win rather comfortably in some cases. And so for them to come in and get that win, I think you can trust them a little bit more. I do think that coming out of a bye and having to go to Wisconsin, maybe that could be a little tricky. Maybe you're a little cautious thinking about that. But I think right now, to win this type of game where a lot of stuff is going wrong, Drew Aller has turnovers. Like, there's just a lot of moving pieces. The defense is giving up these big plays. Coming out with a win, it makes you trust this team a little bit more, especially when you look at where all these teams that are left in the schedule, like where they are. I mean, you work backwards. Like Maryland is a mess. Minnesota, that could be tricky. Purdue is a mess. Washington, they were in the national championship last year, but that's not the same team.
They ran into Iowa today, and Iowa put up 40 points, which they never do. They got absolutely slammed by Iowa today.
Exactly. Then Ohio State is Ohio State. And then Wisconsin has had its share of, they blew an 11-point lead at halftime at this field that I'm looking at right now. So, and they don't have their starting quarterback. So there's just everyone has these different things that are going on that, makes you feel good about Penn State in that sort of matchup. And so I just think that you got to tip your cap to Penn State, because I think in August, not a lot of us saw them winning this game.
Yeah, I think the expectations now, when you look at the floor for this team, and that's barring a stumble, but what you think is 11-1 now, and they have not finished 11-1 under James Franklin, and so that would be a big step forward in any year. This year, it could really give you a chance to make some noise in the postseason tournament. Daniel, I think that's going to do it for this post-game episode. I know that you've got more to get to out in Los Angeles. They're eventually going to want you to leave that stadium as well. But, man, we're going to have a lot early next week. It'll be bye week, so we're not going to have 4 episodes during the course of the week. But we'll be back early in the week. We'll bring Mark Brennan on board. He was alongside you in the press box there in Los Angeles. And we'll really spend some time going through the nuts and bolts of this 33-30 overtime win for Penn State and a larger picture at 6-0, what we think about these Nittany Lions. Maybe we'll recalibrate some of the expectations that we had 7 weeks ago about this squad as they look ahead to the next 6 regular season game. Anything else you want to add to the conversation before we say goodnight?
Just got to say, it's a really cool venue here at the LA Coliseum. I was last year in 2018 when it was being renovated. And so now to see the final product is very cool. It's dark now, but when we started the podcast, I could see the Hollywood sign, could see downtown LA skyline. You can see the mountains in the background. The fog burned off this morning, and it was just a very beautiful day. It's like I got out of the car yesterday, and I was like, oh, it's cool. It's humid. It's a very, very cool October trip. The environment at the Coliseum I thought was pretty good. As James Franklin pointed out, a ton of Penn State fans made the trek. I know that it wasn't packed to the gills, but at different points, USC fans made a lot of noise, caused some communication difficulties, and I think it was just a very, very fun environment. Also an open air press box, which I don't think there are any of those in Big Ten country, and there probably shouldn't be. But just a overall, pretty neat thing. I know that everyone has some mixed feelings about this new Big Ten and what it means, where everything is headed, and we'll see long term. But for right now, in terms of the novelty of Penn State USC as a Big Ten game in Southern California at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS in that window, I think pretty neat, and it provided a great show today.
Some call it La La Land, Hollywood, SoCal, but you can just call it Big Ten country now out there. USC, welcome to the show. Close but no cigar in this case, just as they were on the road to Michigan a couple of weeks ago. They're going through their growing pains. They're at 3-3 here in Happy Valley, where you're heading back and Mark's heading back to. We got a lot to discuss, and there's some interesting things brewing with this particular Nittany Lions team. Number 4 right now, likely to jump up to number 3 on Sunday. Daniel, it's always a pleasure. We're halfway through this season. Obviously, we've got a lot more to look forward to. For now, stepping aside, I'm Tyler Donahue. This has been the Lions 24/7 Postgame Podcast.